I'm fortunate enough to own a pretty nice piece of land that sits about 500 meters back from the main road. To get to my house, you have to drive through about 20 meters of wooded area before the driveway opens up into something that's about as wide as a regular two-lane road in America. Here's the thing. I'm a car enthusiast, and I've legally converted a good portion of my property into a drift track. Everything's properly set up. I've got the county's approval, my homeowner's insurance knows about it, and the local police department is aware too. I've even put up two massive no trespassing signs at the entrance of the woods, plus a speed limit 15 sign just past the wooded area, mainly to keep my friends from getting too excited on their way in when we're not using the track. So today, my buddy and I were coming back from the port where we'd picked up a 1997 Nissan Stagea we're building together. We were driving down my driveway with the car on a trailer when my buddy suddenly yelled out in shock, pointing towards something ahead. He was pointing toward the corner of my paved property where I keep a medium-sized shed. Well, what used to be a shed. I store my landscaping equipment there. My tractor, golf cart, that kind of stuff. Or at least I did until today. What we saw was the front end of a 2016 to 2017 Mustang sticking out of my now collapsed shed, and some guy lying on the pavement next to it. We immediately drove over to check it out. As we pulled up, this guy sits up and immediately starts screaming threats about suing me and demanding that I pay for the damage. I shouted back, demanding to know who he was and why he was on my property with his car in my shed. He responded by threatening to sue me again, claiming my racetrack wasn't safe and that I owed him a new car. By this point, my buddy was already calling emergency services from inside the truck. This guy, let's call him Karen's male equivalent, starts limping toward me, screaming more threats about how he was going to take ownership of my property and leave me penniless when he was done with his lawsuit. I decided it wasn't worth engaging with him anymore and got back in the truck. We waited about 15 minutes for the police, during which this genius started beating on my truck windows with his hands. When the police arrived, they came flying down my driveway with lights and sirens blaring. They saw this guy pounding on my window and immediately put him in handcuffs. That's when my buddy and I finally got out of the truck. When questioned by the police, this genius admitted he'd been driving past my property all summer, hearing engines and tires squealing from the road. He confessed that he had finally decided to try running a few laps today. When the police asked about the no trespassing signs, he admitted seeing them but claimed he didn't think they applied to him. I mean, seriously, who else would they be for? The police arrested him for malicious destruction of property. A local tow company came and impounded his Mustang, and when I finally got to inspect the damage, I realized the entire shed and everything in it was completely destroyed. Keep in mind, this shed was a good 25 feet away from the paved surface. That's how bad his driving was. The guy did end up leaving in an ambulance, though the paramedics said he'd be fine. Nothing serious, just some bumps and bruises from his spectacular failure at drifting. Now my insurance company gets to deal with this mess, which I'm sure they'll just love. The first thing I'm doing this week is installing a gate with a security code. After 15 years of never having issues, it looks like I need to up my security game. At least I've got a good story to tell at car meets now. The tale of the entitled wannabe drifter who thought no trespassing signs were just friendly suggestions. My dad had been in law enforcement for over 20 years at this point. He was well respected in the community and known for being fair but firm with criminals. He always said that most people who ended up in his custody were just people who made bad choices, and he believed in treating them with basic human dignity while still ensuring justice was served. It was a cold winter evening around 9 p.m. when this incident happened. My dad and his team had just finished their shift at the police station. They had already turned in their service weapons, signed all the necessary paperwork, and were getting ready to head home. That's when they got the call about a prisoner transfer they needed to handle. Some guy had robbed a local convenience store earlier that day. He'd been caught, went through a speedy trial, as things sometimes worked back then, and was sentenced to 1 year in prison. My dad and his team were tasked with transporting him from the courthouse to the state prison. My dad remembers being tired and a bit annoyed about the timing, but it was part of the job. He gathered his team, and they went to pick up the prisoner. At pickup, my dad told the prisoner to keep things simple and follow their instructions so they could get him processed quickly. The prisoner just muttered that he wanted to get it over with. The drive to the prison was uneventful. The snow had been falling heavily all day, and there was already a good knee-deep blanket of it covering everything. When they arrived at the prison, they started the standard prisoner transfer procedure. That's when things got interesting. As soon as they got the prisoner out of the car, he must have thought he saw an opportunity. Despite being in handcuffs and surrounded by officers, he suddenly made a break for it. Now, picture this: a grown man trying to run through knee-deep snow while handcuffed. It was almost comical. My dad yelled at him to stop, but the prisoner barely made it 10 meters before he face-planted in the snow. My dad and his team didn't even have to run. They just walked over and picked him up. The whole escape attempt was so pathetic that my dad decided not to even file a report about it. Back then, officers had some discretion about minor incidents, and he figured the guy was already going to jail anyway. That should have been the end of the story. But about a week later, my dad's superior called him into the office. The superior told him they'd received a concerning letter from the prisoner, who was claiming the team had shot at him during his escape attempt. The superior wanted to know why this wasn't in any report. My dad was shocked and explained that they couldn't have shot at him since they'd turned in their weapons before the transfer. The prisoner's complaint triggered a whole new trial, with the same judge who had sentenced him for the robbery. You should have seen this guy in court, spinning his dramatic tale. He went on and on about how they had shot at him, claiming bullets were flying past his head, and that he could have died, calling it police brutality. When the judge asked my dad to respond to these serious allegations, my dad explained that his team had turned in their service weapons before the transfer, and he could provide documentation showing the exact time they signed them back to the station. The judge examined the weapons log, which clearly showed my dad and his team had turned in their guns well before the prisoner transport. The timestamp and signatures were right there in black and white. The judge asked the prisoner sarcastically if he was really claiming they shot at him with guns they didn't even have. The prisoner started stammering, trying to backtrack by saying he was sure he heard gunshots. The judge then sternly told him that he had not only attempted to escape custody, but had also wasted the court's time with false allegations against law enforcement officers, calling it a serious offense. The judge was not amused. Instead of just serving his original one-year sentence, this genius earned himself 3 additional years for the escape attempt and false accusations. As they led him out of the courtroom, my dad could see the exact moment reality sank in for him. The prisoner started protesting that it wasn't fair and demanding an appeal. The judge simply told him he was welcome to appeal, but suggested he stick to the truth next time. If he had just kept his mouth shut about the whole escape attempt, he would have been out in a year. Instead, his entitled attitude and attempt to get my dad in trouble earned him 4 years behind bars. This happened about 8 years ago in Costa Rica when I was 24. I had just gotten my driver's license. Yes, I know that's pretty late, but better late than never, right? I had managed to save up enough money to buy myself a car. It wasn't anything fancy, just a modest older model that got me from point A to point B. But it was mine, and I was proud of it. I had plans to go to a party that night with my friend, and I was on my way to pick him up when this absolutely bizarre situation unfolded. I was stopped at a red light when a woman and her daughter approached my car. The mother had this weird, overly friendly smile on her face. She started by complimenting my car, and I politely thanked her, mentioning that despite its age, it ran well. She then went on to explain how her daughter had recently gotten her license, and they'd been unsuccessful in finding an affordable car. I wished them good luck in their search, thinking that would be the end of our interaction. The woman suddenly asked if she could have my car. When I refused, she demanded to know why, insisting that I didn't need it. When I questioned her logic, she threatened to call the police if I didn't hand over my car to her. I called her bluff and told her to go ahead. I honestly thought she was bluffing. Who in their right mind would call the police because someone wouldn't give them their car? Her daughter was standing there looking absolutely mortified, but her mother wasn't backing down. To my utter disbelief, she actually pulled out her phone and called the police. 3 officers showed up within minutes. The woman immediately launched into her performance, claiming that I was trying to steal her car. I protested, stating that I had proof of ownership while she had none. When one of the officers asked her for proof, she fell silent. I saw one of the officers reach for his handcuffs. I started reaching for my glove compartment to get my driver's license and registration, but before I could explain what I was doing, Officer 1 hit me with his taser. I collapsed, my whole body feeling like it was on fire. After I could speak again, I explained to the officer that I was just reaching for my documentation. We had a long conversation where I told him exactly what had happened, how this woman had approached me and demanded my car, then called the police when I refused. Thankfully, there was a security camera nearby with a microphone that had captured the entire interaction. When they reviewed the footage, they immediately arrested the woman. Her daughter, who looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole, called her father to pick her up. The first officer apologized profusely for tasing me, but I understood. From his perspective, a suspect in a potential car theft was reaching for something. He couldn't know it was just my registration. I didn't hold it against him. It's part of their job to be cautious. I finally made it to my friend's house, and we got to the party about 30 minutes late. The whole way there, my friend couldn't stop laughing at the situation, saying only I could manage to get tased by the police because some crazy lady tried to steal my car while on my way to a party. The party turned out great, but I couldn't help but think about how surreal the whole evening had been. 1 minute I'm driving to pick up my friend, the next I'm being accused of stealing my own car and getting tased. Just another regular day in Costa Rica, I guess. I've been working retail for about 3 years now, and let me tell you, it prepares you for just about anything. Or at least I thought it did, until that day in late March when COVID was just starting to become serious. I was having one of those shifts where you're basically everywhere at once. Self-checkout, front desk, pickup counter, cashier, you name it. It was during one of my money runs to the cafe. They needed small bills. When I first noticed her, this elderly woman, probably in her 70s or 80s, was harassing our cart cleaner, who was just trying to do her job sanitizing a mobility scooter. The elderly woman was being completely ridiculous, shouting about how she didn't need the cart cleaned and calling the virus fake news. When our cart cleaner explained it was store policy and that she'd be done in a moment, the woman just got more agitated, pointing out supposed missed spots and demanding she hurry up. What caught my attention was how easily she was pacing back and forth while complaining. No walking issues whatsoever, just an entitled person who didn't want to walk around the store. I dropped off the money and got called to cover a cashier's break. Walking back, I nearly gagged at the overwhelming smell of alcohol coming from her direction. She had a plastic bag full of empty beer bottles, and I couldn't tell if the smell was coming from the bag or her. I had a bad feeling about where this was heading. Sure enough, she made her way to customer service. I knew exactly what she was planning. Bottle returns. Our store has strict rules. $5 limit on returns, we only take bottles we sell, and absolutely no alcohol bottles. No exceptions. When she got to the counter, our manager happened to be there helping with a long line. The manager politely told her that we don't accept beer bottles for returns. The woman immediately started arguing, insisting she'd done returns there before. When the manager explained that we've never accepted alcohol bottles due to store policy, the woman lost it. She slammed her bag of bottles on the counter, shattering some of them, before storming back to her scooter. She drove off, but not out of the store. She headed toward our in-store CVS. What happened next? I learned from our security guard later. Apparently, she needed money for a prescription that wasn't fully covered by insurance. When the CVS pharmacist wouldn't let her have it without payment, she lost it. She started yelling about how they didn't understand and that she needed her medicine. She started harassing other customers for money, and when that didn't work, she pulled out a kitchen knife and demanded the pharmacist give her the medicine. Security confiscated the knife and called the police. When they were escorting her to the front, They passed by my register during a quiet moment. Not recognizing her immediately, I gave my usual cheerful greeting, asking how she was doing. She responded by screaming about needing her medicine or she was going to be sick. I could only respond with an awkward okay as I noticed our security guard shaking his head behind her. All the way to the security office, she kept ranting about needing her medicine and throwing around racial slurs. That's when a very exhausted looking hospice worker showed up with the police. Turns out she had escaped from her care home to get the medicine herself instead of waiting for the staff to get it for her. After about 30 minutes in the security office, they emerged with the police escorting her out. She wasn't handcuffed, but they were watching her like hawks. The whole time she was demanding they arrest the worker instead, claiming they had thrown her out and repeating that she needed her medicine. The police weren't having any of it. She was arrested and charged for threatening the pharmacist with a knife. I heard she was banned from our store and had to be transferred to a more secure care facility. I guess I should start by explaining a bit about myself. I'm on the autism spectrum, specifically with Asperger's syndrome, and I've always had a special connection with insects. My neighbors were really understanding about my interests, letting me dig around their yards looking for interesting specimens, and some even started calling me whenever they found something unusual. I was 14 at the time this happened, and it was my first real encounter with an entitled person in the wild. Growing up wasn't exactly easy for me. My family situation was complicated, with a fair amount of mental abuse that I'd rather not get into right now. But those experiences made me retreat even more into my world of insects, where things made sense and followed predictable patterns. One spring afternoon, I was in my neighbor's front yard. They had explicitly given me permission to be there, when I discovered this beautiful swallowtail caterpillar. I was carefully holding it in my palm, watching it inch along my hand, when this woman approached me. At first, I didn't pay much attention to her, assuming she was just another passerby. But then she started yelling. She demanded to know what I was doing to the caterpillar and ordered me to put it down immediately. I tried to explain that I was just observing it and wasn't hurting it at all. She accused me of lying and told me to get off what she claimed was her property. When I explained that this wasn't her property and that my neighbors had given me permission to be there, she got even angrier. She launched into a stream of profanity that I won't repeat. Remember, I was 14 at the time. I politely asked her to stop yelling, explaining that she was making me uncomfortable and scaring the caterpillar. This only made her more angry, and she demanded to know if I was trying to tell her what to do. I carefully placed the caterpillar on a leaf and left, even though I had every right to be there. A few weeks later, we had this massive windstorm that hit our neighborhood. The morning after, I was walking to my school bus stop when I saw her again. She was standing in her yard, which was 3 houses down from where our first encounter happened, holding a fallen signpost. When she saw me, her face twisted into this triumphant smirk. She accused me of vandalizing her property, refusing to believe that the windstorm had caused the damage. When I pointed out that everything on the street had been knocked over, she wouldn't hear it. She claimed I was getting revenge because she had caught me torturing the bug. She threatened to call the police, saying they would dust for fingerprints and prove I did it. I just told her to go ahead, noting that I'm sure they'd love to hear about how the windstorm that affected the entire neighborhood was somehow my fault. This made her even angrier, and she threatened that when they arrested me, she would make sure they knew about my supposed history of animal abuse. I just dismissed her with a casual, "whatever you say," and left. Nothing ever came of her threats. I still had to walk past her house every day to get to the bus stop, but she never confronted me again. The whole experience was bizarre. I never understood why she got so worked up about me looking at insects, or why she convinced herself I was some kind of vandal. Maybe she had nothing better to do with her time than harass random teenagers. Or maybe she was just one of those people who need to create drama where none exists. These days, I still study insects. I've gotten better at handling confrontation too, though I prefer to avoid it when possible.